Welcome, everybody. Death Valley Insiders analyst Jermaine Every here live on the fifth quarter postgame show here. Just having a little bit of a technical difficulty getting everything set up for the postgame show today. Wires, cords, and stuff going everywhere, and just trying to get settled in my little spot here. This game was it went just about almost exactly how everybody expected it to. LSU with a big 48-18 win over Auburn. I actually, when I sent in my prediction this week, I had it 41-20 because I figured LSU would cover. I think it was at that time like 11 or 10 and a half or something like that point spread, and the over under was 60 and a half or 60 at that time. So I figured it would be an easy cover. The over would hit, and it probably barely hit because it would need Auburn to help them get to that over 60. LSU wasn't going to do it all by themselves, despite how good this offense is. I just didn't see them scoring that many points against an Auburn defense because that Auburn defense can be pretty stingy when it wants to be. But nevertheless, a really good, solid game from. Well, I won't say solid game because there was some hiccups here and there. Not going to get on the guys too much, but there were some hiccups, things that could have been better. But a solid game overall from LSU. If you look at the our pregame.com Vegas Insider, AJ Hoffman's write up on the game, the line was 11 for LSU and the over under was 60. AJ actually leaned on the under, and he liked Auburn. So this game went like total opposite of what AJ was predicting. Brent says there were too many penalties. Yes, Brent, this was it. It was an uncharacteristic game as far as the penalties is concerned with this team, because if you've been reading my by the numbers stuff that I put out after every game, when I look at the numbers and different things like that, like I hadn't seen this team get a whole lot of penalties. And then you look up and it's like, wait a minute. They had 6 offensive penalties for 40 yards and 6 defensive penalties for 60 yards. So a total of 12 penalties for 100 yards. That was by far their most penalized game of the year, by far. Just the amount of yards that they were assessed on these penalties, and oftentimes when they would get penalties in this season, they would get them, but they would get them. They wouldn't get very many in a game, but they would get them at the most inopportune times. Today, it just seemed like they were just. I mean, it was constant. It was like you could almost count on it. The 4th and 1, I believe it was a false start penalty, or no, procedural penalty. Then you get the false starts. There was a defensive false start. Again, that was one of the craziest. Another week, another LSU game, another narrative that's put out there by this team, another set of what the heck, I've never heard of that penalties. Last week against Missouri, it was the disconcerting signals penalties. This week, a defensive false start. So every week it seems like LSU with these penalties and whatnot, it's a story some way, somehow. But like I said, they have not been very heavily penalized all year. I think the game they had with the most penalties may have been that Arkansas, the Ole Miss game, if I'm not mistaken. But they've never. I think their season high in penalties may have been 6 in one game or something like that. But it just goes to show you, like, this team could, as good as they could have played that much better. And I put it in the live game thread in the chat that this was a bit of a get right game for the defense. Going into it, you're looking at this game where and I talked with Matt Cohen of AL.com, and we basically called Auburn's offense going against LSU's defense the resistible force against the movable object, because Auburn's offense has been abysmal all year. I mean, I've seen LSU put up more yards and a half than Auburn's offense has put up all game sometimes. And so it was just one of those things where this team was simply they simply just beat the snot out of them on offense against Auburn's defense, and on defense they basically just they manhandled them. And the talent really stepped up in certain situations. There was some time still where Zy Alexander was getting picked on a lot, and I know we kind of discussed that a little bit in the live thread. That it just seems like he's either out of position, or a lot of the times he has very poor technique trying to turn and track the ball. It's like he will turn his and face over the wrong shoulder, or he has no idea, no concept of how to like read the receiver's eyes and his body motions and kind of read and play off of that, in order to like kind of read and know and look for the ball. But he has trouble with that. The good thing was that there was a point, I believe it was in the third quarter or so, where he turned around and almost picked one off. And just the two little criticisms that I feel like are getting him picked on, being out of position, and then also if he's in position, he can't turn and like track the ball. He did both of those things extremely well on that one play. So you see the size, you see the talent is there. He's always running with his receiver. However, it's just the turning and tracking of the ball when the ball's in the air, and then also making sure he's always in good position. That tends to just throw him off and screw him up. But again, I really think that he has the talent to be out there and to play and to be on the outside. I just think that with a little bit of work, a little bit of technique, a little bit of practice, a lot more film study and whatnot, and just going through those drills and whatnot, those one-on-ones in practice, I think that's a really good way to kind of help him with that. Just keep studying, and the route tree is going to be the route tree. However, on certain routes, there's going to be certain ball placement that the quarterback is going to want to throw the ball. For example, on those back shoulder throws, you really can't do too much about that. So you don't want to get beat over the top. So you don't want to be trailing in order to be in perfect position to stop the back shoulder throw. But at the same time, if you get them over the top, you're going to give up that back shoulder throw. So you want to make sure you're in position to at least try to knock the ball out, playing it from behind, what have you. It's little bitty things like that that he just needs to tighten up on, some technique and different stuff, and he'll be okay. I'm really wondering about how this is going to give them confidence. Can they build upon this? Because when you face a team like, when they had the shootout with Ole Miss, and then you have another shootout with Missouri that you weren't expecting to be in, and then you come into a game like Auburn and you put up 48, but you give up 18, when you could have had, 50 or 60 probably, and they shouldn't have had as many as they had. So you kind of get those lulls in your schedule. Well, next week you play Army. Army's going to come in with that triple option, and they're going to throw you off your game, and then you get an off week, and then you play Bama. So this was a really critical game for LSU. Again, not only to stay the course and continue to try to climb the rankings, but also a conference game as well as a division game. And again, I keep preaching that this team still has an outside shot of winning the SEC West. They need some help. However, help could be on the way in the form of you beat Alabama. Now you have the tiebreaker over them, and they have their second loss. The only other thing that they would need is for Ole Miss to lose at least two more games. They need Ole Miss to lose two games because they lost to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss already has one loss in the conference. So if both of them have two conference losses, that's going to tie them up, and Ole Miss, of course, would have the tiebreaker. So again, to this 48-18 win, We call this the fifth quarter, and I was given the green light to have a pour on the show. Last week I had a pour, and I did not drink the pour. But this week, in light of a 30-point victory over Auburn, and I know my buddy Michael, he went to he's an Auburn alum. He's also one of my bourbon buddies, so I know he's gonna like this. In honor of the 48-18 victory over Auburn, we're gonna have a pour of Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel, because LSU in fact toasted Auburn today. So that was, I mean, just it was a butt whooping, but it could have been worse, is what I'll say, and it should have been worse. However, again, let's just use this as a get right game for LSU. Let's just look at it like that. If you look at it and in the aspect of they won a game they were supposed to win, they more than covered the point spread. The overhit, they looked pretty good. The offense put up a ton of points. So let's just look at it in a sense of they did what they were supposed to do. They handled business. Brent says he has that bottle. Yeah, Brent, I gotta get another one, man, because I when I get down to the end of a bottle, I always like to try to replace it, before I finish it, especially if it's one that I really like. And I've been hunting after this one for a while. I finally got it, fell in love with it, and I'm just like, gosh, I got to get another one. So I gotta talk to my buddy over at this little spot I like to go to over here near my home. But yeah, again, getting back to the game, if you look at it as this was a get right game for LSU to kind of get the ball rolling, beat a team that you should beat, get some things worked out, get that defense some confidence against a team that's a bad offensive team. Then you come in and you have a quirky game against a team like Army who runs an offbeat type of offense that you don't really see with that triple option. You have an off week to heal up, rest up, practice, watch film, and then get ready for the most physical game you're probably going to play all year against Alabama. And so you have to get some momentum going. Would it have been nice to have beaten Ole Miss in that shootout, and then you had another shootout against Missouri, and then you beat up on Auburn, and then you beat up on Army, and you take it off week. Then you go, yes, it would have been nice to have that ball rolling, going into the Bama game and be on a longer winning streak. But at this point in time, you are where you are. You have two losses in the conference. So I'm sorry, two losses and one in the conference. So you have to stay paced with all the other teams. Speaking of the offense had a very, I would say, quote unquote, average game of 563 yards of total offense that they put up this week. And they're usually, I want to say, like at around 590 or so a game. So this team did what they were supposed to do. Again, I don't see why you would see it any differently. Could there have been less penalties? Yes. Brent, I totally agree with you. And I kind of saw that. I kind of felt that. I didn't even have it in my notes or my numbers or anything as of yet. But I just kept seeing the flags, and I just kept seeing them point at LSU. And, after a while, you start to notice, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, something's going on here. But there was just a ton of penalties. And like I read it off earlier, there was 6 accepted on offense, 6 accepted on defense. So it was pretty balanced. Both sides of the ball have some work to do as far as cleaning up those penalties are concerned. I'm sorry, LSU averages 548, roughly 550 a game offense. They give up roughly 450 a game on offense. And today against Auburn, they didn't even give up 300, right at 293. So that was, just very, very, very impressive. 6 of 9 out of on third downs. At one point, I had it midway through the third quarter. Jaden Daniels was 4 of 6 on third downs for 60 yards. 2 of those resulted in first downs, and a third one resulted in a touchdown to Kyron Lacey right there in that third quarter. So you just gotta take it what you get with this team, because they'll drive you crazy, they'll make you sick, they'll drive you to excessive drinking, all kinds of attitude problems. Just don't break TVs like some people do. Don't break stuff. Stay safe. It may be frustrating being a fan sometimes, but you got to look at it like hey, you know what? There could always be next year. You know, your team could be one of those teams that's coming into a season with really high expectations and just fall totally flat. They're not meeting the expectations that people had for this team coming into this season, because some people thought that they should be undefeated right now, or maybe just only have the one loss. But you are where you are. You're at where you're at. Don't get too down on this team. One of the other comments I put in the live thread was that Matt House is probably going to send Auburn's team some gift baskets after this game, because I swear the natives are getting restless with Matt House. Like, people are highly upset. At one point during last week's game, he was a trending topic on Twitter with 12 some odd thousand tweets mentioning Matt House. So to see this defense come out against a bad offense and just totally squash them, it was really good to see. It was a pleasant surprise, because I really thought that, LSU has been the get right game for a lot of these offenses this year. And I had a feeling that Auburn would have some success against this defense. They would find something that they could lean their hats on. And they just never did. They just couldn't really get anything going. So it was kind of odd. If you guys hear anything in the background, that's the sprinklers that I have on a timer going off. The grass got cut earlier. The sprinklers were moved. I forgot to go and move them and make sure that they wouldn't be making noise against the window while we're doing this, but here we are. So cheers, drink to that. Another thing that I noticed, Jaden Daniels had another 400 some odd yard total offense, because he had 325 in the air, 93 on the ground. No rushing touchdowns today for him, although he got close. There was it was one play, I believe it was in the fourth, early in the fourth or late in the third. It was a zone read. He takes off, fakes out the camera guy, and with his long stride, you're looking at him and you're thinking, I don't think he's going to score. And he got hit, spent off of one hit. Another guy wrapped him up, and he fell right at about the 1-2 yard line. And every time he runs, I look at him and I think, gosh, this kid really needs to get down. And he did that several times today. Instead of taking the big hit, he got down and slid. Self-preservation is key for an athletic and or running quarterback. You have to, for any quarterback, really, make a business decision. People talk about business decisions in football all the time, and one thing that people need to start making business decisions on is tackling Caleb Jackson. I'll get to that in a minute. But Jaden, he has such a way of eluding pressure and slipping and sliding out of the pocket and getting yards down the field. And I love what he does. However, it's the big hits, the hit that caused the fumble against Ole Miss. The helicopter hit where he got hit and it looked like it spun him around. I believe that was against Arkansas, maybe. But just sometimes the hits that he takes, and especially with his body type, it kind of makes me nervous thinking that, they're going to break this guy in half. But I love that he got down. I love that he slid. I love that he will fight for the extra yard. However, he won't always, he doesn't fumble. He doesn't turn the ball over very much. So that's good as well. Yeah, the cameraman did stay with Diggs on that play, Brent. And it was, I'm trying to keep an eye on it because I was like, Diggs does not have the ball. And I'm like trying to watch the bottom corner of the screen because that's where Jake Daniels was running. So anyway, but he's running the ball just as much as he has all the time. However, I love the self-preservation, sliding and trying to shield himself from taking the big hits. because last week it was that hit that he tried to get in the end zone that they called back on a penalty. That he, I believe it was a rib, a rib or an arm or something like that he hurt last week, shoulder or something. But that one was a play where okay, he scored. The hit was kind of whatever. It was questionable, but still, it wasn't a dirty play. It was just something that did he need to take that hit, and those are the plays that I think now that we're so far into this season and seeing how he's progressed as far as being a pocket passer, knowing when to run, when to throw, check downs, putting touch on the ball on some of these routes, just his progression and his growth as a quarterback overall, I'm really impressed with. And I just need to see him not take so many big hits when he decides to pull it down and run or escape from the pocket. If he can grow and develop that part of his game, I think it'll be just lights out for this kid. And they showed a graphic that showed of all the draft eligible, I'll say, quarterbacks potentially heading into this NFL draft season, the 2024 draft. Someone mysteriously has him ranked ninth of the top 10 draft eligible quarterbacks that could potentially either they're graduating or they can declare. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to name 4 or 5 that I think are better than him current. You look at what Michael Penix Jr. did today, and he solidified himself. I believe he was the betting favorite heading into this weekend for the Heisman at plus 220. He showed up and showed out for Washington today. You look at the second betting favorite heading into this weekend, incumbent Caleb Williams over at USC. They were getting drubbed by Notre Dame 38-20 the last time I looked up, and he threw 3 picks in the first half. You look at Drake May over at North Carolina. They were in a dogfight with Miami today. I'm not sure how that game is going right now, but you know there's 3 guys right there that maybe you could say, okay, I could see maybe these 3 guys, maybe. But let's just be honest. Penix Jr. Is he that much better than Jayden Daniels? I don't. I'm not quite sold on one is better than the other. I'll need to watch a little bit more of Michael Penix Jr. and kind of get a feel for him. But I could see why there's the hype surrounding Caleb Williams. I could see that he has some physical traits and some attributes with his arm talent and whatnot that's just rare. And that's great. But how does that translate to the next level? And sometimes people will fall in love with certain physical attributes and certain things that a person can do athletically or with their arm talent and whatnot. However, when you see Jayden Daniels and he stands tall in the pocket, reads his progressions, and he looks safeties off now. He doesn't think to just pull it down and run. He actually tries to stand in the pocket, make his reads, but he will slide around in the pocket or move his launch angle, or I'm sorry, setting his feet to get to a better position to throw the ball. So a lot of the times he uses his escapability, his athleticism and whatnot in order to make a play down the field instead of just taking off and running with it. So Notre Dame game ended 48-20. Oh, man, that just and it's been crazy today. And it was funny because someone told me, like, I was on the phone towards the end of the game, and they were like, man, it's just been a crazy day of college football. Some friends of mine were texting the group text, and they're like, bro, like, I can't believe this, like all these games today and like just this weekend. But LSU just the way Jayden Daniels has progressed and the way he's adding layers and building upon things. And Brent says UNC is up 38-17. Oof. Man, I mean, just there's just been some great and it's a compound thing for Miami, just as a sidebar, real quick, because of the way they lost to Georgia Tech last week when they could have just kneeled it out and won the game. They end up trying to run a play with 20 some seconds left, fumble, and then leave a Georgia Tech receiver basically wide open for the game winning score. Then you had the UH game with West Virginia, where West Virginia scores the supposed game winner with 12 seconds left. UH ends up throwing a Hail Mary play that they actually practiced, um, and hit it with no time left to win that game. You had the Colorado was up 29-0 and ended up losing in overtime. I mean, just these games this weekend have just been crazy game after crazy game. The Washington Oregon game earlier, like I talked about. I mean, college football has been just crazy this weekend. It's been some weird games, weird results, upsets, wacky endings, and whatnot. But again, getting back to LSU, they handled business today. And like I was saying previously, I really don't think that there's that many draft eligible quarterbacks that are that much better than Jay Daniels that I would say, hey, you know what? I would take these, and I think they had him at ninth. I would take these 8 draft eligible quarterbacks before I take Jay Daniels. It's not happening. I'm sorry. You can find and fall in love with the height, weight, speed of a guy or the arm strength of a guy or something like that. But Jaden Daniels he may not be the thickest guy, but he's 6'4", so he has the ideal height. He's very elusive. He's quick for a tall, long strider. He can really make up yards when he gets out in the open field. He's shown the propensity now to start sliding and not taking those hits. He can do that. There's certain things that he can do that he just hasn't shown that he can do, that he's starting to show that he can do. Throwing from the pocket, looking off safeties, knowing when to check it down, knowing when to pull it down and run, knowing when to get out of bounds, knowing when to slide, putting touch on the ball. And he's shown a really good accuracy in some of the toughest places to throw the ball, like outside of the numbers and deep in the middle of the field and whatnot. So he's showing that he can play quarterback on the next level. Now, one of those things that they tend to, and it's not even a knock as much as it used to be in the last few years, but taking snaps under center. He takes snaps from under center. So you can't use that as one of those knocks against him. I saw that, and I got to remember, as a matter of fact, I'm going to type that up right now while I'm on here with you guys, if I can move my mouse properly. But I got to type that number up in the by the numbers that someone out there thinks that there are 8 draft eligible quarterbacks better than Jay Daniels. Triple QB. Okay, yeah, I just had to type that note real quick because if I don't, I'll end up forgetting and forget that line when I'm supposed to write. But if I just type that little number in that note, that'll let me know, okay, here's how you whatever. But just giving y'all a little behind the scenes of sometimes how I write and how I operate. But another thing is, again, Logan Diggs with another great game. 18 carries, 97 yards. John Emery Jr. had a few good carries. He had 6 for 42. I also saw that they did that little, it's a new play that offenses like to run over the last, 3 to 5 years. The little jet sweep kind of touch pass. It's basically a handoff, but it's technically a completion because the ball is moving forward instead of being handed sideways or backwards. That's why it's technically a completion, even though it looks like a run play. But they tried that play with Malik Neighbors twice. Didn't really work as well as you would think, and it got decent blocking. It's just that those plays sometimes can take a while to develop because he's coming from one side of the formation, crossing the quarterback's face, and then going to clear to the other side of the formation. Typically, when a guy goes in motion, there's someone following him, or the defense starts to communicate, passing him off. But Auburn just ended up playing those plays pretty well. But I like that LSU put those plays in their playbook simply because you need something to keep the defense off balance. You can't just drop back and think you're going to air it out and you can't just line up and think that you're just going to smash mouth it or finesse the run game or what have you. You have to have some motion, some off-schedule plays, some things that'll kind of throw the defense off a little bit. And that's one of those plays that I'm glad that LSU added it into their offensive repertoire, I'll call it. Another thing that I noticed, and the announcers even picked up on it and talked about it more today, was the use of Harold Perkins Jr. in the slot. Now, the way they said it, the way they described it, was that LSU stays in a 4-3 defense simply because as that third, quote-unquote, linebacker, Harold Perkins Jr. can actually play the slot. He can play a rush end. He can move around, do different things. They said the way I think it was Jesse Palmer, the way he described it is when you put him in the slot, he can not only cover that guy out there, but he can also get to those outside zone runs, shut those down, as well as shutting down those little bubble screens or screen passes to the running backs, tight ends, so on and so forth. All these different gadget plays that you're starting to see out of a lot of these spread offenses in the last few years. Having a guy out there like that with that kind of speed, strength, athleticism, and instincts allows you to keep your quote-unquote base 4-3 defense on the field, but at the same time be able to cover when they go 3 and or 4 wide. Another thing is when he blitzes from that position, he's coming off that edge pretty much free because nobody's really accounting for that guy. They have someone to account for him, but it's a running back, or a tight end maybe that they may shift to that side of the formation, or maybe they may have that receiver or whoever split in that slot, chip block on him or something. But just the way that they use him on this defense, letting him rush off the edge in key passing situations. There was a play where he was in his outside linebacker position. They had the DN lined up wide, but Harold Perkins Jr. lined up like right next to him, standing up. And when he's screaming off that edge like that, and he's causing so much trouble and getting in the backfield so quickly, he had I think he had a couple. How many sacks did he have? Let me take a quick look. But I know he had at least one sack, and he had another play where he blew up a run, like almost met the running back in the backfield as the quarterback was handing the ball off to him. So it was just, that guy he's something special, because there's no way a guy 6'1", 220 should be able to manhandle offensive lineman the way he does. It's crazy that this guy can actually do that. But he uses his speed and converts it to power, because when you use speed to power, so you'll hear that a lot. It's a buzz thing. But basically, they come off the edge so fast, and you get underneath the offensive tackle's pads, and you get into him and get your hands on him quicker than he can get his hands on you. And so suddenly that now you can kind of catch him before he sets into his kick slide and gets into his pass protection stance really good. If you can get into him before he can get into his stance and kick around and be ready for you, you got him beat. And when you can use that speed and catch him off guard and hit him first, that's usually when you can control that guy and kind of bull rush him, or just rip and swim under, or swim over, and rip under, and you can just whip him around the end. And then you can use that move when you step to that outside shoulder, and then boom, hit him with the spin move, or that jab step back inside and hit him with the inside pass rush move. So just watching him in the different ways that they use him is simply amazing. The defensive tackles stepped up really big this game. Jefferson, Wingo, and Mason Smith. Those guys just really stepped it up big. Shand, the other defensive end, had a couple of plays. Um, just all over. And like I said earlier, I know I was giving Zy Alexander a lot of crap about being out of position and not being able to track the ball. But he actually led the team in tackles with 9. 6 of them were solos, and he had 2 pass breakups as well. So, as much as I say he's good and he's got the talent, the athleticism, the frame, and everything. There's a few technique things and just some awareness and whatnot that I think he needs to work on. Yeah, Harold Perkins Jr. had 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, a pass breakup, and a quarterback hurry. He had 5 tackles, 4 of those were solos. So again, when you got pass breakups, quarterback hurries, a sack, and tackles for losses, like he's stuffing the stat sheet, but he's also making a difference when it comes to affecting the other team's offense. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does next week against Army. Because when you look at a team like Army, Army's going to run the ball a lot. They average right at 200 yards rushing a game. Typically, they like to run the ball a hell of a lot more than that. However, they haven't been very good on the season. They're only 2-4 on the season. It's going to be a 6:30, looks like, kickoff next week on the SEC network. So LSU's going to have their work cut out for them. It's not going to be a pushover game. I don't see. I mean, 95, 96% of the people on the matchup predictor on ESPN have picked LSU to win the game. So it's not like this is going to be some sort of surprise. It's going to be another tune-up game for LSU. I can't really call this a get-right game because this game here today was their get-right game for their defense. I think next week the offense needs to come out and just utterly dominate Army and be firing on all cylinders. I think the defense needs to come out and play very physical and forceful and exert their athletic talent and prowess and physicality over Army. And I just think that, LSU needs to, I won't say they can't 72-10 Army like they did Grambling. And I don't want a 72-10 like that because they had Grambling looking way too comfortable early on in that game. But I think another dominant win by this team and another dominant performance by this defense will give them confidence going into that bye week and then heading into that Bama game. And that's what they ultimately need. They need to be well rested, healed up, but they need to be confident. Because when you're playing a team like Alabama, playing well is one thing. Playing with confidence and executing is something totally different. So they need to be well-oiled, executing, and confident, happy, healthy, all of that good stuff. Whatever they got to do, hey, do it, because that game is going to hinge your season right there. Because if you look at all of their games outside of that game, they're all games that they should definitely win. Because Army should not present a problem. I don't think Florida will present them with a problem. They're going to be good, but talented, of course, because it's an SEC team. But I don't think that they should have a problem with that game as well either. Georgia State should not be a problem, and Texas A&M has been so Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde this year. Last game of the season, they probably don't have much to play for. That should not be a problem either. And so I'm just looking at this Alabama game as the one you always circle on your schedule, but it's circled even more so now because that game is almost the one that they're just going to have to look forward to. So next week we'll come to you guys after the Army game. Hopefully it's another very dominant win for this LSU team. There will be a bye week, so not sure we may go live and just chit chat with y'all for a little while on that bye week just to keep the consistency going and everything. We'll figure out something though. But next week should be another good dominant win for this LSU team. Hopefully everything goes well in practice this week and this team will continue to march on and throughout the season. We are rooting for all opponents against Ole Miss. So I got to check and see. I'm not sure if they even played this week, but I know that's one thing that I'll be keeping an eye on is what Ole Miss is doing and what their opponents are doing to see what they're going to do leading up to their games with Ole Miss. Because LSU really needs some help if they're going to try to win this division. But with that, guys, I'll leave y'all with it. Y'all have a good night. We'll see y'all next week after the Army game. This is Jermaine Every from DeathValleyInsider.com. I'm an analyst there. Signing out. See y'all next week.